third Zoom seminar, or as we call it nowadays, a webinar. And this is the first professional webinar for panel discussion. I'm the host, the moderator of this panel. My name is, I'm Dr. Chen Kertcher, and I'm the moderator. And this panel will deal with Islam in Europe. I specifically said Islam in Europe. It's not just Islam and Europe. Analyst and I had plenty of discussion, and we decided that currently this is the best topic, or at least the first topic that we should deal with. I myself, I specialize in global affairs, on international peace operation. I published several books on conflict resolutions. I currently serve as the academic supervisor of the foreign policy studies in the Department of the Middle Eastern Studies and Political Science at the Ariel University. And also I supervise these topics in MECARC. MECARC, if you're not familiar with, is the Middle East and Central Asia Research Center. It's quite a new center, deals only with all kinds of affairs deal with the Middle East and Central Asia. Now, last week on the 30th of April, the German government outlawed the political and military wings of Hezbollah. As all of you know, the Iran-backed Lebanese Shia organization. And this legal action it was accompanied by police raids on mosques in dozens of places, and places we all know as Christian usually. Berlin, Bremen, Dortmund, Münster. The German Interior Minister, Horst Seehofer, he claimed that Hezbollah is a terrorist organization deemed responsible for numerous attacks and kidnapping worldwide. And this last action of the German government, it raises many questions. Is this just an ad hoc action by the German government for criminal activities on German soil? Or perhaps it reflects something else. It reflects a transformation in German politics and also in European reaction to something that is much more deeper, as the tension between Islam and Europe. And before we begin, I was pondering about this topic, and I tackled with a book. I don't know if you're familiar with this book, from 1937 by a Belgian historian called Henri Pirenne. And in this book, titled Muhammad and Charlemagne, Pirenne stated that without Islam, the Frankish Empire would probably never have existed, and Charlemagne without Muhammad would be inconceivable. That is, Carolingian Empire created a vision of Europe that is in its core, it lacks Muslim. It strived to be anti-Muslim. Nowadays, or at least in the past decades, we see several main issues that contradict this trend, at least in the 21st century. And I hope that today the panelists could answer several of these topics. The first topic is the topic of migration and refugees. According to some sources, probably in 3 decades from now, the Muslims will be at least 15% of the European population, and perhaps 20–25% in the major cities, at least in Western or Central Europe. So this is a big issue. A second issue is the global Islamic terrorism movement that sprung into global affairs since 2000, and Europe was connected as a base for many of these activities. And of course, we raise this question of why doing it, and perhaps Hezbollah and the German action is just one of these responses. A third issue is that Europe is surrounded by a destabilized region, the MENA region, as we sometimes call it, the Middle East and North Africa, which put a risk to the stability of the European project. A fourth issue is the transformation that we now see that pose many challenges to liberal democracies, the systems that were created very carefully after the Second World War. And currently we see a rise, a continuous rise in right-wing parties, in populism and nationalism. Finally, all these issues should be considered nowadays in more scrutiny due to the coronavirus. In the past months, we can see the detrimental effect on economic growth and social stability. Now, in order to deal with all these topics, we have two prominent and very important scholars and colleagues, if I may to call them this way, from Ariel University. We have here Dr. Avi Weber. He holds a PhD in the field of European and German social law. He is an expert on European politics. Currently, he serves as the external consultant to the Ministry of Social Equality on post-World War II compensation issue. As we know, this is still an ongoing issue. The second scholar, a prominent colleague here near me here, Dina Lisnyansky. She holds a PhD on Islam in Europe. She had 2 postdoctoral degrees with a research focus in the field of radical Islam and terrorism in Europe. She is an expert on radical ideologies, religious extremism, terrorism, counter-terrorism, and security. She currently serves as one of my colleagues in the MECARC Research Center. I prepared several questions for Avi and Dina, but I asked from you who really decided to join with us to this Zoom meeting. Please, if you have question, perhaps a new question that we didn't think of, please write them to me personally to my chat box. And if we will have some more spare time, I will raise this question to my colleagues here. So, because we are committed to manners, so I will decide that the lady is first. So Dina, if you may, I have a question for you. Can we identify a connection between the German actions toward Hezbollah and the COVID-19? And how all of this connected to what I previously raised as the Islamic Salafi movements inside Europe? Perhaps you can elaborate on this topic. Dina? Dina? Okay, if Dina cannot, she has a technical problem, Avi, can you please say a few words on this topic?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to talk today. I think that this is an ongoing issue, and it's going to be a dominant issue within both German politics, and I would even say European politics in coming weeks and months. The question that you're raising about the effects of COVID and the virus and the Salafi movements, I think that in my eyes, you should look at it from the following aspects. I think that the virus and the effects of the virus, meaning the restrictions and the steps undertaken to restrict human, or to say civil law issues, create some sort of, generate some sort of a general concern in public, which mobilizes usually people that have central and liberal views into positions that are less liberal and are less open. So in that respect, I think that the pandemic and the facts that people have been affected generally, work-wise and also personally, might infringe or might create more aggressive reactions by people towards or less tolerance towards immigrants. If you look at, for example, to compare Europe and America, you see that in America, people are already taking steps, both Congress and the government and the administration, to restrict the ability, let's say, to migrate. And we expect in several Central and Eastern European countries to have the same steps. But I think that I see that Dina is now joining us, that she can actually
Dina.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please,
Dina, I wanted to begin with the lady, but you were so polite, so you let Avi to begin. I asked, this was also Avi began, what I wanted you to answer. Can we find a connection between the German action toward Hezbollah and the COVID-19? And can we find all this within like a much more bigger question on the relation with Islamic Salafi groups inside of Europe?
Yeah, definitely. There is a connection, but I would like to even start with a somewhat of an anecdote, because this has been for the last couple of months the best thing we have heard. During the outbreak of COVID-19 in February, one of the main warnings from Salafi jihadi leaders, especially ISIS leaders, were posts in their blogs when they warned ISIS fighters not to go to Europe because it's not safe there. So we must say thank you, COVID-19, at least for this one. Regarding Hezbollah, Hezbollah has been very active, not only on German soil, but on the European soil for many decades. In fact, after being kicked out of Sofia in Bulgaria, where they had their main quarters, they have moved to London, where their main quarters still reside. And only a few months ago, they were outlawed in the UK, which is somewhat new, because during all these decades when we were, I mean, not just us, but many other experts in this field were lobbying against Hezbollah in the UK and the EU and in the European Parliament, obviously, we were always told that Hezbollah is mainly a political organization that has nothing to do with terrorism. And in fact, they have two different branches. One was the political branch, and the other one was the military branch. And I must say that this modus operandi is in fact very common among many movements, terrorist movements and organizations, including Hamas, which is still, by the way, legal in most of the European countries because of that. So this very unnatural dividing between the branches led to the fact that these organizations were still within the framework of the European law. And the fact that now they're getting outlawed, that being banned in the UK and later on in Germany, as we've seen, this is the fruit of work. This is the result of a very serious work that has been done by many experts in this field, many lobbyists in this field, and many people who have given a serious professional chunk of their lives to promote these ideas. I would like to also tell you a little bit about the main problem that was and still is there. And Chen, I think you have referred to this problem in your introduction when you have said that the main issue lies between the fact that there are Muslim communities on the one hand that deserve liberal rights and deserve minority rights and private rights, etc. And on the other side, there are boundaries of security. Where do we draw the line there? And the fact is that during, this line was drawn during the, well, not so recent, but during Bataclan events in France. And about that, I would like to say a couple of words if we have the time. So what actually happened was the fact that in France, there was the issue of incapability of even administrative laws against terrorists' possible attacks. What I'm actually trying to tell you is the fact that if someone would even know in the police, within the framework of their work, that there might be a secret or a dormant cell of ISIS or Al-Qaeda or any other terrorist group
Suddenly, Dina, it it seems that you are under terrorist attack. They don't want you to. They don't want you to share the secret of what happened in France. Avi.
Yes.
Avi, can you explain to us? Dina just raised the question concerning the French perspective. Can you give us a more depth analysis of what is going on in Germany?
Well, I think that first of all, it's important as we started to speak that when we speak about groups or the terror groups, we're aiming or we're dealing mainly with the minority within the minority, that is the Salafic movements and the terrorist cells of Islamists in Europe or perhaps also in Germany. So it's very important to have in that context a very clear understanding that we're talking about radical groups or radical parts of minorities within Germany, and that in German society we have a couple of millions of active and pro-democratic Islamic forces acting as well. So it's important, first of all, to make that draw. Having said so, as we know that some extremists within those groups of Islamists, not all of them being homogeneously. We have to remember that the Muslims in Germany, they belong to different ethnic groups. So we have the Middle Eastern group, we have the Bosnian group, we have the Balkan group, we have the groups from the Far East and so on. So it's again very complicated to speak about the radical Islam in Germany in as one group. But the main idea is, as I said before COVID-19, was to ensure or to make sure that everyone receives the basic human rights and the freedom of assembly and freedom of activity. So in Germany, where is this we call a negative democracy, meaning that we're basically allowing everybody to do everything unless or as far as it's not restricted by law. There were a lot of legal complications and political complications in order to withdraw or to halt or to seize activities of these organizations. Another problem, of course, is the general narrative in Germany, which is the post-war narrative, where Germany, in comparison with any other European country, is extremely sensitive to infringement of basic rights of its citizens or people on the German soil. If you look, for example, in the German constitution, it does not refer only to citizens, it refers to citizens and all those who are on German territory. So the basic human rights are rendered also for people who are not typically your good citizen or this nice citizen and whatever, and also people relating or being in contact with those groups or actually being active in those groups still have their basic rights as far as it's not taken or it's not infringed by the government. If I may add another historical dimension, the German government in the 70s, as we all know from Israel about the stories of Munich and what followed the events of the Munich Olympics, we had at the same time terror activities of different German groups who are not Islamistic, but combined with other Palestinian and Soviet groups in the 70s. And there the German government was actually following a paradigm that was also later on taken by the Austrian government. And that is, if we allow these people or these terrorists to act freely on our soil, and we don't attack them or we don't limit them and we allow them free access to you can have all the resources in society, then they won't attack us or our institutions or our buildings. This has, of course, changed dramatically, unfortunately, during the ISIS, so to speak, emerge also in Europe. We're very well aware in Israel also of the attacks in Berlin, for example, just before Christmas, which of course was not only a single targeted attack, it was an attack that was made also to be coordinated with the biggest civil or religious holiday in Germany, Christmas. So we do see also a change in the pattern of activities in Germany of these groups, and that as opposed to what we were accustomed in the past, that Germany was only the base to bank, create headquarters and to hide, that Germany is becoming also a place where these actions are happening. Now, I'd like to top off your question. You had a very good question, what's actually happening in Germany. So in Germany, you can divide these activities into three. The first activities is, of course, the activities made by the government. Government is, of course, limited when it comes to taking steps with those groups. We always see it from the Israeli prism, which is the right way to see it in Israeli eyes. However, Germany, of course, has its contacts and has its interests in the Near East and also with other countries such as Iran. And therefore, every step that is undertaken against a organization or against a group also goes through the filter of the security and the international interests of the country. What helped the decision that we all opened this discussion with against Hezbollah and the outlawing of the group was a parallel process that happened actually in three different arenas. The first very important arena was the arena of the judiciary. In Germany, any act to limit groups would be attacked immediately in courts, and people would maintain that it's against constitutional rights of these individuals that were infringed of their right. And therefore, Germany, in some ways, is sometimes overprotective or has a very large internal security organizations in order to factually base a case against a group of people or individuals, which usually leads to some sort of an overcomplicated process in Israeli eyes. So just a bit different than what the Shin Bet would be doing in Israel. The German authorities usually have to build a very solid case before actually taking a step against those groups. The second thing is that there was a very important decision of the Supreme Court for administration in Germany, actually allowing these steps to be taken. This already happened in 2015 about limitation of some of the illegal activities of Hezbollah. So once the legal hurdle is passed, we have to come back to the actual political arenas and to the international situation of Germany. So quickly, German parliament around the 70th, in the run-up to the 70th years of independence of Israel, actually concluded a cross-house resolution incorporating actually the acts of Hezbollah as acts against the existence of Israel, connecting those to basically the réseau d'état of Germany, and calling on the German government to take actual steps in order to limit and downsize the activities of Hezbollah there. These decision that happened last year was actually now taken into an administrative decision of the Ministry of Interior, as you said, Horst Seehofer. And at the same time that this was declared, a day later, I would say some sort of an action against about 1,000 members of the organizations took place in Germany.
So it didn't take place suddenly. You say it was a process.
No, that's what I'm trying to say. It's a process. Yeah. And I think that Dina, that is now joining us back again, actually helps us understand this issue. Because Dina, in her words, spoke also about the activities that are undertaken against Hezbollah in London and Paris. So then again, I think it's important to see that in order for those steps to be successful, we need a legal clarity, allowing governments and ministries to take these steps. That's already happened a few years back, which is important. Then we need at the same time an understanding of the public sphere, the public discussion, meaning the parliament reflecting what the street is talking about. And then we mentioned also the previous attacks also in Germany, in a way preparing the people, preparing grounds for such aggressive steps against basic...
Okay, these are fascinating points. Dina, can you now give us once back, like a wider perspective, connecting also these dots of Islamic or extreme Islamic terrorist movements and the entire connection with the Syrian refugees, for example, the tension between Europe and Turkey, just to try to connect all the dots that both of you just raised here.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for your patience, because I have a lot of technical problems today, it seems. But we see, we've been talking about Bataclan for just a second. I would like to just finish this one. During the Bataclan, there were still no laws that enabled administrative arrests, etc., meaning that they had to make new laws. But it wasn't possible in the state of out of emergency. So Francois Hollande, who was the president of France then, in the evening after Bataclan, at 11 o'clock at night, he said that France is going into an emergency state, a state of emergency that has been enabled in France for the first time since World War II, which is absolutely alarming, of course. Later on, we've seen the same happening in the UK. During this state of emergency, France has enabled its police and other organizations within the realm of security, taking care of security. It has enabled them to do administrative arrests and to do everything they had to do in order to prevent acts of terrorism on the land of France. The same laws after that were accepted as not just emergency laws. Later on, 2 years after that, exactly 2 years after that, in November 2017, already by Macron administration. And the main thing that is interesting for us here is to see the pattern that is going on in every European country since then. We have seen it in France, we have seen it in the UK, we are now seeing this in Germany. And I'm not even talking about Italy and Spain that are already in the same vortex of new legislation regarding terrorism and freedom of speech and freedom of activities, etc. About what you have mentioned before, Chen, when we're talking about the refugees, again, I'm going to speak a bit about 2015. In 2015, about 2 million Syrian refugees were going to enter the European borders from Turkey into Greece, the Balkans, etc., into Central and Western Europe. The thing is that these 2 million refugees made more buzz.
I apologize for this technical problem. Okay. Dina? Well, sometimes it's happening. Avi, can you give us a final note in your perspective of what will happen from now on, like in the next year?
Well, I think that we're going to see a longer...
Can you mute Dina, please, so we can hear Avi? Thank you.
All right. Right. So I think that this is an important process because the Hezbollah process has been a specific cross-border process that has been going on for many years now. We have quite a lot of NGOs that are involved in this process and been targeting this specific organization. I think that now once it has been established that these steps can be taken, and once there has been a move into actually taking those radical steps against those radical Islamists in Germany, I think that the way to continue and work against other organizations that are already active in Germany and elsewhere in Europe could take place. We know of a long history of organizations actually being active in Germany and Central Europe. And I think that this was the first big movement that we've been working on for quite a long time between Israel and friendly nations in Europe. I think in the last few years, if you look into the surge also of the the dialogues that we've been having, the strategical dialogues that Israel has been having with our counterparts in Europe has been intensifying and it's been better. We've just seen in Israel a credit fight over this issue between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Mossad. So I think that if we look to the longer run, we would be actually looking into the outband of more radical groups in that respect.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I think we step out of time for this session. I'm sure that we will have other session. I would like to thank Avi and Dina for they raised many issues concerning internal affairs of Germany, France, and Europe, etc., and also what will come in days to come. I think that we will see that the situation is very fluid, and we need to think ahead, and we need to think about different solutions, if these are political, judicial, and of course, security, in order to address this volatile climate in Europe. So I would think that Ariel University is the Middle East and Central Asia Research Center. We are dedicated to try to bring to you all some authentic and responsible voices from different experts. All of us try to think out of the box and to take different approaches to these challenges. Today's webinar is the first in a series that is planned to try to deal with different geopolitical issues. And we look forward for welcome you back. Thank you very much, and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you.